Here's a few news stories that I thought were interesting. This one is pretty horrifying. DeSantis in Florida warned Walt Disney World not to question his rule silencing certain speech about gay rights, but Disney felt obligated to do that because they had just finished their own battle with gay rights. And so now he has removed their special tax status. Disney was sort of a separate separate county within the state or something. They were owned, and he's now taken over, and now he has claimed that government officials are going to control Disney's content. They're going to censor their cartoons and make them politically sending the messages he wants to send. This is the sort of thing that is not supposed to happen in America. This is in countries where you have political censors telling people what kind of art they can put out, what they can put in books and such. And it's very clear this is what DeSantis plans to be. And so you can listen by Zoom or Twitch for the speaker, but it'll be higher quality on Zoom. And just a minute, I've got to plug in my power. And there. All right. So anyway, it is pretty disturbing to think that Ron DeSantis is likely to be our next president. His vision of what he wants to do here is not what I like. Now, nanoparticles are what happens. Nanoplastics are what happens when you throw away plastic. It ends up in the water, and it eventually breaks down into tiny particles, a micron or smaller, and they are considered to be quite dangerous, although I think people don't entirely know what they're going to do to you, and you can't even tell where they are, but the biggest concentration anywhere is in South Korea, and they're trying to develop a test to easily measure how many of these particles there are in water. It turns out to be very difficult to detect them, so they have a new system combining Raman spectroscopy and a nanoparticle of, I think, silver that attaches to this nanoparticle so they can detect it with lasers. So they're hoping to develop a better test to determine how many of these particles there are in water. And having to measure it is, of course, the first step before you can then try to determine how harmful it is. This has been kicking around for the last several days. The report came out from a federal agency, not the FBI, saying that they, with low confidence, concluded that COVID was a lab leak in Wuhan, which was, as I recall, during the early days of the pandemic, this was considered a wild far-right conspiracy theory, and everyone said it happened from a wet market where people were selling fish and such, and spread from like birds or fish to humans. But now the FBI director has also said it's most likely a lab incident in Wuhan. Now, I've already seen headlines on Fox saying that this proves that the Chinese deliberately released COVID, which I think is an outrageous statement. But it is possible that it came from a lab, and this has been a far-right thing. You've heard Rand Paul talking about this for years, saying that they were doing gain-of-function research. They were deliberately making a coronavirus more dangerous, and then it got out. And this has been widely discouraged as an outrageous disinformation, false claim, but now it's getting more push. But I'm not sure anything has changed. They aren't determining with high confidence. They're just saying this based on sort of suggestion. And I think it never was anything different. As I remember, when they asked Anthony Fauci this, he said, well, I don't think it came from a lab. I think the evidence shows that it came from natural transmission from animals, but I'm not sure. So, I mean, this has always been a possibility, but they seem to be pushing it now as they're really trying to gin up general hostility towards China, I think. Yeah.
But the latest report from the Energy Department, the latest report that come out,
Yeah.
from the Energy Department is still saying that low.
Yeah, the Department of Energy concluded this with low confidence.
Yeah.
And that means they do think it's more likely than not, but they're not sure by any means. And that's all we got. But before, this was considered outrageous. And now it's...
It seems to be got the ambassador in China to push it.
An ambassador in China pushed this?
Yeah, trying to get the ambassador.
Oh, American ambassador, perhaps.
Push the reports.
Yes, and I mean, I don't know if there's any actual new scientific data to justify this. I think it might just...
Fighting the game. They just fighting the game.
Yes, that's what I think. I think it might just be that this is now politically expedient to say this. But anyway, it does show our general increased hostility towards China just getting worse and worse. So Russia has fined Wikipedia several times for publishing facts instead of propaganda, and this is the third fine, and they got fined again. They have the articles they got punished for are listed down here. Russian invasion of Ukraine, battle for Kiev, war crimes during the Russian invasion of Ukraine, shelling of a hospital in Mariupol, and so on. These are all the things that the Russians want to deny. And
So Wikipedia has no office in Russia, right?
that's an interesting issue. I don't understand how they're finding Wikipedia from Russia. I see Tim is here.
It's Google. They keep on finding Google, but then Google is already left on
Well,
Russia.
yes, that's the part I didn't find in this article. I mean, do they do business in China? Do they make money in China? Do they have to pay fines in
They
China?
find a couple of U.S. companies like Google and some of the big ones, but
Yeah.
they don't have an office in Russia anymore.
Yeah, I know. It seems to me like if China blocks you, like Google, then there's no incentive to pay the fine.
Yeah.
But I don't know if they-
They're not paying the fine anyway.
Yeah, I don't know if they block Wikipedia. I see, Tim, I see you're here. I usually start with the news for the first 10 minutes, as you know, I think. So,
Yeah,
okay.
I know. It sounds good.
Yeah, it's interesting stuff. Anyway, so here in business, this is a big thing in San Francisco and every other major city because in the pandemic, all these offices sat empty for 2 years, and now most people do not want to go back to the office. People have tried to make them come back to the office, and people mostly refuse. So they seem to be settling on like maybe 2 or 3 days in the office, and that means you don't need so much office space. So there's all these office buildings sitting half empty, and apparently they're going to be half empty. So the logical thing would be to convert them to housing, which we need, but the zoning regulations prohibit this. The local legal obligations are problems. So there's a new bill they're trying to pass just to the Office to Housing Conversion Act, just to make it possible to turn these places into housing more rapidly. So we'll see what comes of that. And this one here, now let me skip this one for a while because I think there were other ones that were more interesting. This one was interesting. Took me 2 hours to test this. Sumo is monitoring tool. It's like a competitor to Splunk, Sumo Logic. It is very, very hard to install. Everything about it is slow and painful. I assigned it to my students one time, and none of them could make it work. I managed to make it work once, and just one student did. And it took me like 2 hours to do a simple test here, but this is a full disclosure, leaking a vulnerability, and I verified it. I managed to show this is true. It's a very simple vulnerability, same thing I found in a lot of Android apps. If you manage to make an account and install the collector for Windows, which is the thing that will collect log data from your machine and forward it to Sumo for analysis, that collector puts your secret API key in the log on that Windows machine, exposing it insecurely. And it's absolutely true. I tested it and it worked. It's a very common flaw. I found it in several Android apps. They put secrets in the log. As a matter of fact, it happened to Nessus. Nessus, when it made its first Android app, they put your password on the SD card, which is a similar kind of mistake. You store a secret in an insecure place. Anyway, but this went with full disclosure. He did not tell the company and let them patch it. So there'll be a period of time when this is known and not patched yet. I'm not sure how serious it is because you'd have to have the ability to read files on the endpoint to get it. So,
Logic got bought out by private company, right?
what's that?
Sumo Logic got bought out by private company.
Well, I thought Sumo Logic was public. I don't know who owns
They
them.
got bought out.
Yeah, they could have been. Yeah, I don't know who owns them these days.
They were making money.
Yeah, people recommend it for monitoring cloud servers. They say it's better than Splunk for monitoring cloud instances. I've been unable to use it effectively, but it's popular. It's a serious business. Anyway, so Elon Musk, of course, has to jump into AI. And of course, he wants to make it not woke because his whole thing is to be on the alt-right now. And so he wants to develop AI ChatGPT. First there was the Microsoft AI chatbot called Taylor, and within a few days people managed to chat to it and get it to say horrible racist and sexist and offensive things. So they carefully designed ChatGPT not to do that. If you ask ChatGPT how to kill somebody or how to make a bomb or something, it won't do it. It has a list of things it won't tell you because they're trying to avoid saying horrible things, and Elon Musk, of course, disapproves of that. And so he wants to make a ChatGPT that will not be woke and try to avoid doing bad things like that, with fewer speech restrictions and hopefully integrated into Twitter. So that is the kind of thing, that's what he tried to do with Twitter. He thinks that by letting all the Nazis back on Twitter and that he's somehow saving the world. He thinks that he's going to create harmony in America by letting everybody share Twitter with no restrictions on free speech. Although I tend to agree with most people that we already tried that. That's how we ended up with all these content restrictions on social media. We tried running social media with no content restrictions, and it turned into a war zone, and everybody put in all these restrictions to try to make some civility. So this is very interesting from Krebs. This is why I wanted to skip to this one. I've always wondered about SIM swapping, and now this article makes me understand it much better than before. And there's a chart here. He went through these messages on a cybercrime forum announcing that people had T-Mobile accounts for sale and graphed them. And here they are in like a 6-month period, many of them. Then T-Mobile started improving their processes and went down sort of around December of last year. But what these people do, they hire people to talk on the phone to these people. You call them on the phone, you read from a script. He even has some example scripts that you read. You tell them that we are your help desk, and we need you to log into this special portal to test your account or something, and that portal is a well-designed phishing portal that looks really good, and they steal your credentials from that portal, and they log into that account, and then they use this employee's credential to change the identification number of a phone to a different phone so someone else will get your messages. And then they can get in all your accounts because your password reset goes by SMS and your two-factor authentication goes by SMS. And this is what they were doing, and there's a whole industry of this. There were a whole bunch of people would get people to call them, and they get an account, they would then sell it for $1,000 or $2,000 on a forum. And T-Mobile accounts sell for about half the price of AT&T accounts because apparently T-Mobile accounts are easier to break into. And another thing I thought was very interesting here is they say this is all nonsense, this is all preventable. If T-Mobile switched for their phone representatives from SMS-based authentication to hardware key authentication, this would never work. And Google did this about 5 years ago. They switched everybody to USB key authentication, where that's the second factor, and they said zero phishing has ever happened from then on, because there's nothing anybody can steal that will let them reproduce your login, because they can't steal what's on the hardware key. They can get your name and your password, but they can't log in with your name and password. It will only let you in if you really have that physical key. And this seems so obvious, and it hasn't been done, and perhaps this sort of embarrassment will move people in the direction of actually using that. The lawsuit.
Don't have hardware key, right?
What's that?
But the user don't have hardware key.
Well, the users could also have a hardware key, but even if they had like a phone app, it would be better. But I mean, a hardware key is the best. A phone app like Google Authenticator is the second best, and SMS is the worst. The reason why this whole thing happens is because of SMS, because it's pretty easy to intercept, to redirect SMS to go to a different phone.
SMS is text, right?
Yes, yeah, and that's the problem. Texts are just not really secure enough for this. That's why people keep getting in. It's the most common technique, though, because I think most people understand text. And that relates to this. I mean, all this information has been coming out about what's going on inside Fox News because the Fox News anchors and their donors and Murdoch and everybody used plain SMS text to discuss stuff that was going to get them in legal trouble later instead of using something safer like an encrypted app like Signal or WhatsApp. So all this is coming out. And one thing that came out last week from a lawsuit filing is that they all knew that Trump lost the election, and they knew that they shouldn't tell people he had won, but they decided to because the stock price fell unless they did. So they realized they had to peddle lies just to keep the stock price up, and they all formed a conspiracy to say things that they absolutely knew were false and harmful to the nation in order to make money, and they just admitted this openly. The other thing they admitted, which is pretty amazing, is that Rupert Murdoch got ads from Joe Biden to put on Fox News. They had paid political ads, and he took those ads and leaked them to the Trump campaign in advance, which is enormously tipping the scales. That means they know what ads are coming out later. They can write counter ads that will run earlier. And that is, I wonder if that's illegal. It seems like that probably is illegal. I think when you sign a contract with someone to publish their stuff, they can't just show that to your competitor. I wonder if...
They do that a lot of times. They do that all the time because when you see the political ad, you see one side of ad, then the next side of ad is...
Well, they do make counter ads, but I don't think they're allowed to see in advance what's going on the other side. That's why they plant spies and such. That's like industrial espionage. I imagine that is violating some kind of law, but maybe not. Anyway,
you have to let the other side know to get the counter ad, appear. So
you would think so.
Somehow do the same thing.
Anyway, I think I'll stop on this one. Google just has decided that they don't want to pay for more office space, so they're now telling employees to share desks. Each of you will come in 2 days a week, and you will share desks and even share computers and trade back and forth. So anyway, that's all the news.